in the beautiful mountain kingdom, aptly known as a kingdom of the sky, and a land endowed with one of our continent's most vital resources, water. The African Union has dedicated 2026 to the theme assuring sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems to achieve the goals of Agenda 2063. Water remains the African Union has one of Africa's most pressing challenges to achieve the goals of Agenda 20. Climate change, pandemics, rapid urbanization, and population growth continue to strain access to clean water and sanitation. Despite strong policy frameworks reflected in Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals, the reality remains stark. And the Sustainable and more than 20% of sub-Saharan Africans still 300 million Africans practice open defecation. This is unacceptable in the 21st century. Access to clean drinking water as the most vulnerable bear the greatest burden. Unsafe water, poor sanitation in the 21st century, and inadequate hygiene contribute significantly to child mortality and morbidity. It is unsafe water, poor sanitation. Estimated that up to a quarter of deaths among children under 5 could be prevented by addressing environmental risks, including access to safe water and sanitation. Access to safe water and sanitation. Diarrheal diseases alone account for nearly 10% of deaths in this age group. The APRM's country review reports, including those of Egypt of 2019, Namibia of 2020, and South Africa in 2021, consistently highlight water scarcity, unequal access between urban and rural areas, and governance gaps. These findings are further reinforced by the Africa Governance Report of 2023, which establishes a direct link weak public service delivery, poverty, and conflict. Between poor governance, of these challenges lie weaknesses in governance system conflict. Other institutional capacity and political commitment to deliver these essential services. We must be honest with ourselves. While progress has been made, we have not moved fast enough. The fact that we continue to deliberate on access to such a basic necessity reflects shortcomings in delivery. One would have expected that on access to such a basic following the adoption of Agenda 20 moved fast enough. One would have expected that implementation plan, these fundamental needs would have been adequately addressed. APRM reports over the past 63 and its first 10 years, 23 years, have persistently highlighted the needs have been adequately addressed. For strong governance frameworks which ensure greater accountability in public service delivery. For strong governance framework, to be honest, we need decisive governments with the ability to ensure that dedicated budgets service delivery to not end up in the pockets of corrupt officials. We need to ensure that our governments are held. To be honest, we need decisive to a higher standard of accountability and responsiveness. We need leaders with the ability to not end up in the pockets of care deeply about their own citizens and actually take decisive steps to address these concerns. We need to support the capacity of our state institutions to be more pragmatic, the capacity of our state pragmatic and less bureaucratic, to be more responsive, more caring, more connected to the realities, to be more responsive, more caring. Failure to deliver on these most basic needs to our citizens has resulted in this crisis. These challenges are, however, solvable through decisive leadership, political will, and a commitment to implementation. This brings us to some fundamental questions. Have we failed? Largely, yes. The persistence of this brings us to some. These challenges reflects gaps in delivery. It reflects lack of strategic leadership, and yes, the persistence of oversight, and in many instances, poor management of state resources. Can these challenges reflect gaps be addressed? Yes, decisively so. But this requires strategic interventions, strong institutions, and leadership. Can these challenges be firmly committed to delivering for citizens? Where will the resources come from? Strong institutions and leadership. Financing remains a critical concern. It is estimated that $114 billion is needed each year globally to ensure adequate financing for water and sanitation services. Africa alone requires a critical concern. It requires approximately $50 billion annually. Africa alone requires by 2030. Yet the continent loses over $88 billion each year by 2030 to illicit financial flows, resources that could otherwise transform infrastructure and service delivery. We continue to lose $140 billion to illicit financial flows, dollars each year to corruption. More than enough to invest wise transform infrastructure, critical infrastructure for our citizens. Again, this points to poor governance frameworks, our inability, and in many instances, our lack of will, inability, and in head on. Addressing these leakages through strong institutions, transparency, and accountability is essential. How do we move forward effectively? Firstly, we need to work together. This is why I have made it a point to join you in this important forum. And I thank my dear sister, Honorable Gahar, for that. This is the first step. Secondly, we need to speak. This is the first step, with a collective voice. And I thank my dear sister unequivocally, with clarity of purpose, with the ability to speak truth to power. But more importantly, with collective actions on the ground, there where it matters the most. To speak truth to power. For APRM, our focus remains governance. There where it matters the most, by strengthening institutions that ensure accountability, improving public financial management, and fostering collaboration between governments that ensure accountability, private sector, civil society, and community we can make the change between governments happen. It also requires prioritizing investment in essential services, private sector, civil society, and community, supported by robust oversight mechanisms to ensure that resources translate into tangible prioritizing investment outcomes. Above all, it demands urgency, coordination, and collective responsibility at the continental level. At the same time, we must diversify coordination, domestic resource mobilization, effective tariff system. We must diversify firms and well-regulated private sector participation. International partnerships must prioritize equity, effective tariff sustainability, and system strengthening. Investments in water recycling, ecosystem protection, private sector participation, and climate resilience will be key to long-term success. And system strength. As the African peer review mechanism, we recognize that diagnosis alone is not enough. While we have produced over 30 governance reports highlighting many recommendations have yet to be fully implemented. All point to one central conclusion. Africa needs more effective, delivery-oriented governance. To address this gap, the APRM is shifting from diagnosis to delivery. Through our governance support program, we will work closely with member states to translate recommendations into actionable our governance support program, national plans, and measurable results. In partnership with nations into actionable both state and non-state actors. This is how we ensure real impact and tangible results. In closing, I commend the African Committee of Experts on the rights and welfare of the child for its timely focus on financing universal access to water, sanitation, and hygiene for every child in Africa during this session. I also congratulate the governments of Lesotho and South Africa on the 40th anniversary of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, a powerful example of regional cooperation in securing sustainable access to water. Your Majesty, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us move beyond commitments to concrete action. Our children deserve not only our promises, but also results that are delivered with urgency, integrity, and purpose. I thank you for your kind attention.
Distinguished Chair, honorable members of the committee, Excellencies, it is an honor to open this session. As the presiding officer of the African Union Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, ECOSOC, at a time when Africa is called to reaffirm its commitments to children and to interrogate the depth, rich, and lived reality of those commitments. Across our continent, the protection of children's rights is a direct measure of whether our societies are organized around justice, dignity, and inclusion for those who are most vulnerable. Distinguished Chair, honorable members of the committee, Excellencies, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child remains one of the most comprehensive legal instruments of its kind globally. Yet, its actual value is found in how the protection and promotion of children's rights is experienced. As we examine periodic and complementary reports before this committee, we are reminded that law alone is not enough. Its meaning is realized only through domestication, enforcement, and social legitimacy. What emerged repeatedly and what we must be honest about is the persistent legal frameworks and the lived experiences of African children. This gap is shaped by uneven institutional capacity and consistent political commitment and the limited integration of communities as partners in child protection systems. Children do not experience violations of their rights within the confines of the political spaces where we deliberate about them. They live and endure these violations in the everyday realities of their homes, schools, streets, in informal settlements, and in rural communities, where state presence is often then or absent. In these environments, violence can become normalized. Deprivation can become routine. And silence can replace accountability. It is precisely here that the role of communities and civil society becomes imperative. Across the continent, community actors and civil society organizations often act as the first and sometimes only line of support for vulnerable children. Accessible language mediates between informal and formal systems and give meaning to protections that will otherwise remain distant. sense, where these actors are sense, where these excluded or sections that will over resourced child protection systems risk becoming performative as opposed to protective. Risk becoming honorable members. Distinguished Chair, this year's African Union team on sustainable water availability and safe sanitation systems speaks directly and safe sanitation systems to material conditions that underpin children's rights. Access that underpin children's right to water and sanitation is a sectorial rights. Access issue as well as a determining factor in whether multiple rights can be realized at home. Issue as well a child without disease, but is also structurally pushed further from education, health, and protection systems. For girls, inadequate sanitation is often a threat to dignity, safety, and continuity in schooling. And when children spend hours each day collecting water, as well as witnessing the erosion of childhood itself. These are interconnected rights, failures that require integrated responses in both policy and community ownership. Distinguished Chair, Honorable seventh ordinary session of members. At this 14th, we must interrogate whether our commitments to Africa's children have left. We must interrogate whether any meaningful painful footprints. Are children safer today than our commitments to Africa? They were at the adoption of a charter where protections exist in law. Are they consistently enforced? They were at the adoption in practice. And what forms of accountability are we prepared to strengthen often to close the gap in practice. And what between obligations and implementations? In this regard, I welcome work, including guidance on issues such as substance abuse and implementations, use among children, guidance on issues given that harmful practices persist because they are often embedded. These are important interventions often legitimized by tradition and insufficiently challenged at the community level. Similarly, the growing concern of substance abuse among children cannot be addressed from punitive measures alone, as it requires prevention ecosystems that are and prevention ecosystems trained in families, schools, and communities. Distinguished Chair, exams, data and sciences, Africa's demographic communities. Young and expanding rates, making this agenda one we can no longer ignore. Approximately 47% of Africa's population is under the age of 18. And in several member states, children constitute more than half of the population. In simpler terms, nearly 1 in every 2 people on the continent is a child. Children constitute context, a consistent nearly 1 pattern emerge where rights are often strong in legislation but fragile in implementation. As a result, normalization of violence against children, often and cultural norms that discourage reporting and accountability. In addition, we are witnessing more and more inequalities in access to education, health care, and social protection, particularly for children in rural areas. Informal settlements and conflict-affected settings. At the same time, new challenges are arising. Today, we are seeing how digital environments are refined conflict-affected, showing childhood in ways that outpass the means in which regulatory systems can respond, exposing children to new forms of risk while also perpetuating inequality. Likewise, exclusion remains the reality for children with disabilities, displaced children, and those living at the very edges of state systems, where protection is weakest and opportunity furthest away. In response to these challenges, what citizens are increasingly calling for is not an accumulation of policy framework, but more presence through systems that are visible in their real. That is continuously evident in the lived realities of governance and protection. To give effect to this imperative, we must undertake a fundamental reconfiguration of how child protection is conceived and operationalized. The realization of children's rights cannot rest on state-centric paradigms, nor can it be effective when detached from the societies within which children live. It therefore requires, nor can it be effective, a more inclusive and rights and human-centered approach, one that draws in communities, strengthens and empowers civil society organizations, and recognizes children themselves as actors in influencing the system that govern their realities and futures. In this regard, the role of this committee is unequivocally indispensable. Throughout its mandate and institutional functions, their realities and futures. It carries a weighty responsibility responsibility to contribute to the recalibration and fortification of the continent's accountability architecture. In doing so, it is unequally positioned to ensure that the efforts of the committee evolve into a responsive and impact-driven system capable of engendering change across member states, capable of ultimately the success of this session will not be measured by procedural outputs alone, but by whether a child in a rural village, an informal settlement, or a conflict-affected area is safer, more visible to protection systems, and more able to claim their rights as a result to protection systems of the decisions taken here. There is of the decisions taken. Nevertheless, space for measured optimism across the continent. Communities continue to mobilize despite limited resources and constrained support. Civil society actors continue to document violations, amplifying accountability and advocacy, amplifying accommodating for reform in the face of entrenched challenges. Young people, too, are increasingly asserting their agency, refusing exclusion from decisions that shape their present and their future. These evolving dynamics offer building blocks upon which more responsive and sustainable systems can be built. As we open this session, we are called to close the distance between continental commitments and the experiences of everyday children, and to ensure that the frameworks we have constructed for protection are demonstrably effective in practice and impacts. I thank you very much.